Hey guys, this is Ken McElroy, and you are listening to the Mailbox Money Show with Bronson Hill.
All right, so this is going to be a really fun show. You guys are going to love this. This is Mark Podolsky, and he is awesome. He talks about land flipping, and it's a different way that I've really heard. I mean, I know those of you are familiar with land flipping, you know about it, but it's really compelling. I mean, the way he's able to basically get a 300% return on each transaction and actually build a scale to where it becomes fully passive. Super interesting, right? So you're talking about scaling income, really high returns, creating something that is more passive, maybe a little more work in the beginning, but more passive over time. Really compelling. I think it'd be compelling for just about anybody who's looking to generate cash flow and is willing to do some work and some legwork to get it going. So let's jump in here to hear Mark Podolsky. All right, Mark, welcome to the Mailbox Money Show. How you doing?
Bronson Hill, thank you so much for having me. My pulse is normal, respiration's fine. I'm excited to be here.
That's great. Well, I am too, man. I got your book recently. I haven't got a chance to dig into it. Dirt Rich, about land flipping. I've had some friends that have really started kind of delving into the space, and I know you've done a lot of it. You've done over 6,000 land flips, which is kind of staggering that someone could do that. Over how many years was that?
Since 2001.
That's a lot. So that's how many per year then? That's like hundreds per year on some years.
Yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot.
So yeah, and I know
Yeah.
you've got systems, you've got things in place. We're going to jump into all that. And on the Mailbox Money Show here, we do talk a lot about different assets, and this is something we haven't talked about as well, is how to flip land. And I know there's people that entitle land, there's people that will buy land and sell it, and just learning, curious to learn about the strategy that you've kind of gone about here. But give us a little bit, if somebody doesn't know about your work, tell us a little bit about your background and how you got started in this, and kind of what got you going on land flipping.
Yeah, if we rewind the tape to 2000, I was a miserable, micromanaged 45-minute commute to work and back investment banker,
Okay.
specializing in mergers and acquisitions with private equity groups. And Bronson, it got so bad for me. I wouldn't get the Sunday blues anticipating Monday coming around. I'd get the Friday blues anticipating the weekend going by really fast and having to be back at work on Monday.
Yeah.
So my firm hires this guy. He's telling me that as a side hustle, he's buying up raw land at tax deed auctions. He's flipping them online and he's making a 300% return on his money. And Bronson, I'm looking at companies all day long. A great company, great. Has 15% EBITDA margins or free cash flow.
Wow.
Average companies, 10%. I'm looking at companies all day long, less than 10%. So of course, I don't believe him. So
Yeah.
I go to New Mexico with him. I got 3 grand saved up for car repairs, and I buy 10 half-acre parcels, an average price of $300 each. I flip them online, and they all sell for an average price of $1,200 each. It worked. So I took all that money and went to another auction, and this is in Arizona, which is where I live. And again, it's 2000,
So
and there's
to that,
no
so
one in
you're
the
buying
room
$300. This is for like an acre, or this is
for a
like
half acre.
for a half acre, three hundred
Of,
dollars. Does that even still exist anywhere in the country right now?
you could maybe $500 now, but it's still cheap.
Okay, so back into okay, so a little cheaper, and then you find a way to flip them. You sold them online for more, and then you went to the next place.
I went to the next place and I took all that money. I was buying lots and acres for like nothing. I sold all that land and I made over $90,000 cash. So I go to my wife and she's pregnant. I said, honey, I'm going to quit my job and become a full-time land investor. And she's like, absolutely not. So I said, okay, okay. So it took 18 months for the land investing income to exceed the investment banking income. And then I quit and I've been doing it full time ever since and still absolutely love it.
Okay, wow, that's amazing. So land flipping. Now, I have some friends. I have a friend actually, and I live in Los Angeles. There's a friend that bought some hillside land in Los Angeles for 50 or $70,000 and entitled it and was going to build something, and it was like on kind of steep stuff, and all the permitting was kind of expensive. But it wasn't like you're not talking about like really entitling anything. You're just talking about taking it, buying it one place, like marketing it and selling it another.
Yeah, let me walk you step by step through the
Yeah,
model. So Bronson, you're in LA, right? And
yeah,
okay, so let's assume that you own 5 acres of raw land in
yeah.
Arizona where I live,
Hmm.
and you owe $200 in back taxes. So you're advertising two really important things. I mean, number one, you have no emotional attachment to the raw land. You're in LA, you're in California, the property's in Arizona. And number two, you're financially distressed in some weird way because we don't pay for things like our property taxes. We don't value them in the same way. And as a result, the county treasurer keeps sending you notices saying, Bronson, if you don't pay your property taxes, you're going to lose this property to a tax deed or a tax lien investor. So all I'm going to do is look at the comparable sales on your 5 acre parcel for the last 12 to 18 months. I'm going to take the lowest comparable sale. Let's just say it's $10,000. And I'm going to divide by 4. And that's going to get me what Warren Buffett would call a 300% margin of safety. So I'll
Right.
send you an actual offer of $2,500. Now you accept it. Why? Because for you, $2,500 is better than nothing.
Yeah.
In reality, 3 to 5% of people are going to accept my quote unquote top dollar offer.
Okay.
But now that you've accepted it, I have to go through due diligence or in-depth research. I got to confirm you still own the property. I have to confirm back taxes are only $200. I have to make sure that there's been no breaks in the chain of title, no liens or encumbrances. And so what I'll do is, because it's only $2,500, for $11, I'll hire my team in Jamaica. They're connected to an American title company, and they'll go through the title report and they'll get me all the information that I need, as well as for my next buyer, the plat maps, aerial maps, the satellite maps. I'm going to get photos. If it's a new area, I'll pay $50 for somebody locally to go out there, like on a Craigslist gig, and have them fill out the property report as well. Are the neighbors, dumping anything? What's the road like? How far from the nearest
Yeah.
services? All these things. So let's say everything checks out and I buy it from you. Now, if it was over $5,000, I'm not going to mess around. I'm going to use it close traditionally through an American title company. But this is
Sure.
only $2,500. I'll take a little bit of risk. It's fine. These typically don't have a long chain of title.
Yeah.
So now that I've bought it from you for $2,500, I'm going to sell it 30 days or less. I'm going to make a cash flow like a rental home. So Bronson, I have a built-in best buyer. Do you know who it is?
Ooh.
The neighbors.
Huh.
So I'm going to send out neighbor letters saying, hey, here's your opportunity. Protect your privacy,
Yeah.
protect your views, know your neighbor. So
Yeah.
oftentimes the neighbors will buy. If they don't buy, I'll go to my buyers list. The buyers list doesn't buy, I'll go to a little website you may have heard of. It's the 15th most trafficked website in the United States called Craigslist.
Yeah.
I'll go to another
Go
one
there.
I know you've heard of called Meta, the buy-sell groups, the Facebook marketplace. And then I'm going to go to the lands, landmodo.com, landandfarm.com, landsofamerica.com, landflip.com, land.com, landhub.com. These are platforms where people buy and sell raw land.
Yeah.
But the secret is I'm going to make it irresistible. So all I'm going to ask for is a $2,500 down payment for someone to control that land. And then I'll make it a car payment. Let's say
Yeah.
$297 a month at 9% interest for the next 84 months. So I've got this
Wow.
one-time sale. I'm going to get my capital out on the down payment. I could go 6 to 10 months out. And then I'm going to get $297 a month, $297 a month at 9% interest for the next 84 months. Bronson, no renters,
Yeah.
no rehabs,
Nothing to
no
manage.
renovations,
Yeah.
no rodents. And because I'm not dealing with a tenant, I'm exempt from Dodd-Frank, RESPA, and the SAFE Act, all this onerous real estate legislation.
Yeah.
So it's a simple game. Can we create enough land notes where our passive income exceeds our fixed expenses? And now we're
Amazing.
working because we want to,
Yeah.
not because we have to.
Well, I wrote this book behind me called Fire Yourself, which is just that. How do you create enough passive streams to do what you did, where you're able to replace your working income with passive income or more investment income? So that's really, I love a couple things about that. One is that you've got your price figured out. You find kind of a non-competitive blue ocean space that no one else is probably reaching out to that person, and you get a great deal on the property. So the money's made on the buy. And then when you sell it, you're basically getting back what you put into it. And then you're just doing an annuity stream for the next 84 months. The next 7 years, you got this kind of cash stream coming from something that really didn't, after 30 days, really didn't cost you anything. So you can reuse your capital for other deals as well. Now, let me ask you, Mark, how do you source these? Are you doing direct mail? Are you going on, like, I guess, lists of people that are delinquent in taxes and calling and that kind of thing?
Yeah, we like direct mail. So we use software, and we use our own software called lgpass.com.
Okay.
And essentially what we'll do is we'll upload a list from the county. And I might get that list from like a datatree.com, right? And so I get that list. I'm going to scrub the list essentially by APN number or assessor's parcel number, so that I'm doing it by neighborhood and
Yeah.
acreage. Because if I send somebody an offer who has 40 acres, the same as 5 acres, the 40-acre person is going to send me back glitter in the mail.
Yeah.
So we want to be intentional with our offer price. We also want to do county research really well. So I want to know definitively there's a market there. So for example, I mean, you're in LA. I'm not going to get any LA infill lots, 25, 30 cents on the dollar.
Right.
So I want to be looking at rural areas, 2 to 3 hours from the nearest city, where I have this inefficient market
Yeah.
that essentially what's great about it is nobody knows the price of their land. What's terrible
Yeah.
about it is no one knows the
No one
price of
knows
their
what
land.
things are worth. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we
Right.
see that, right? So we're making our own market in that sense.
And how much, I guess I'm curious, how much are like for the example you gave, $2,500 transaction or per transaction, there's a marketing cost that goes into that. There's there's some time that goes into it. So like how much goes into that one deal, would you say on average?
So that's a really good question. So 90% of this business is automated with inexpensive virtual assistants
Yeah.
and software. So our costs are super low because we're using free platforms
Yeah.
to market the property. The paid platforms are relatively inexpensive as well,
Mhm.
and we're getting reimbursed on our marketing expenses and our labor expenses by charging a note setup fee.
Okay.
So when we sell the property, everyone knows there's real estate fees. We call it a note setup fee, and that's where we get reimbursed on those expenses as well.
Sure. That's great. No, I think that's awesome. It's nice when you can cover what you have. And so that's great. So you've been able to really scale this up where you've started, doing stuff here and there. And then how long were you doing this before you started realizing that, hey, I can actually, create systems and processes so that I don't have to be the one who's getting the list and calling people and negotiating. Like you have people that can kind of do this for you. How long did it kind of take you to kind of get this set up?
Years, years. I mean, I was, you got to realize, like, I was very arrogant coming out of the investment banking world and thinking, oh, I'm killing it in this land business and I can make my own hours. And it felt like I had this great business. What I had was just a better job than I
Better
had
job.
before.
Yeah.
And so I didn't even realize it until I had coffee with a mentor of mine and I'm kind of humble bragging about what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And he's like, Mark, stop. He's like, you're insulting me. I'm like, what are you talking about? He's like, don't call yourself a business. I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, what happens if you get hurt or you die? What happens to your family and your so-called business? He's like,
Like,
who's going to do
whoa.
the X, Y, and Z? Because you're doing it all. And I'm like, oh. He's like, and at the time, Steve Jobs was alive. And he actually used Steve Jobs as an example. He's like, what do you think would happen to Apple if Steve Jobs dies? I'm like, well, that stock's going to tank. But he's like, no, but Apple will continue to
Yeah.
thrive because that's what a business is build something bigger than yourself. Well, I'm
Yeah.
like, well, how do you do this? He's like, well, you just need to start swim laning out all the things you're doing and then replace yourself.
Yeah.
And so, I kind of did it kicking and screaming, and I was like, no one's going to care like I care, and no one's going to do as good a job as me. And I was completely wrong. I was
Yeah.
completely wrong. Yeah.
It's really amazing. There's Michael Gerber that you mentioned, like the E-Myth Revisited, where he talks about, a lot of times people think that they have a business, but they have a job, and it's really the job of a entrepreneur is you don't work in your business. You're trying to work on your business. You're developing these new things and these new things to try to create and kind of above your business to try to help open and kind of create these things. And I know you have we talked about your book, Dirt Rich, that you have systems in there on how to do this. And you also have kind of in your business, you have things from books and online things to like one-on-one coaching and all this stuff. So there is a way for people to do this more passively, which it sounds like that's once you build it up, there is a way to kind of get things to be more passive, correct?
100%. I mean, the last thing I want any of our clients to do is build another job for themselves.
Right.
And so we've really been very systematic in how we train people to do this step by step. It's not like flipping on a switch. So you have to have enough competence so that you can go and then delegate, not abdicate. And
Yeah.
so there is a process to it. There's a method to the madness. And it's really just about the first sort of algorithm, if you will, or heuristic is what do you hate doing the most?
Yeah.
And so that's the first thing you want to delegate. And so there should be some joy even in the beginning of as you're building your business. So for me, intake was the worst. I would talk to sellers and they would tell me their story and it'd be a 30-minute conversation so I could buy their land. And so having an intake manager and having that taken off my plate and having them incentivized even to
Yeah.
renegotiate a lower price was so great. It's like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. And once you
Yeah.
start getting that taste of freedom, like, well, what's the next thing I'm doing that
Yeah.
someone else could do? And you just kind of go down the line until you have a self-managed company, and it's really systematized and automated.
Yeah, I'm part of a group called Strategic Coach, which Dan Sullivan, who wrote 10, 10x is easier than 2x and who not how, and just the idea that you can have a self-managing company. And actually, I talked to my team today. We had a team meeting, and I was just like, "Hey, this is a self-managing company. Doesn't mean I'm never here. It just means that you're leaders that are empowered to take care of this stuff." And so it's a way where you empower and you create systems and processes to be able to do it, which really is amazing because that's really what I think we all want, right? Is freedom over our time. And it seems like guys like you and me, we still work, we're still doing podcasts and putting things out there, and we're still teaching and coaching and whatever we're doing because we love it, right? We love what we're able to create for people. But then you got this passive stream that's just an engine that's just continuing to create for you. So who is the ideal person that to get into this? I mean, and also is it is there still a lot of space like in this area, or do you feel like it's kind of getting more competitive, or what's it look like?
Yeah, it's so funny because when I started teaching this, even my wife was like, "Aren't you going to create your own competition?" So I'm like, "Oh, that's a good point." So I put on my investment banker hat and said, "Okay, well, how big is this market?" And there's billions of acres of raw land available, and you couldn't think of a more boring real estate niche.
Yeah.
So you're not going to go on HGTV or the DIY network and say, "Flip this land." The before pictures raw land, the after pictures raw land. Private equity groups, hedge funds, they have too much money for this niche.
Yeah.
So essentially, millions of people could be in this space and they'll all run out of money before they run out of deal flow. So in the cycle, what I see is, there's going to be times in the economic cycle where it's really easy to buy because we're in a recession, but it's harder to sell. Then we
Right.
have equilibrium. It's easy to buy, it's easy to sell, and then the market gets super hot. It's way harder to buy at a good price, but things are flying off the shelf.
Right.
So it's it's just like any other business in that sense. And what was something that I thought was great about this model that other models don't have is the default. So we don't do any credit checks
Right.
and we use a land contract. So there's no
Yeah.
cost of foreclosure. So if we have, let's say, a 12% default rate, that means that a percentage of these people are lowering my cost basis
Yeah.
on my portfolio. And now I can go ahead and resell it and
Yeah.
increase my ROI on those properties.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah, I think, well, I'd imagine too, the last couple of years, we do a lot of large multifamily apartments. And so, we've seen, land values in a lot of places or just even values of certain, especially commercial properties go down quite a bit. I'd imagine that it's becoming much more attractive, like pricing is going down or has gone down the last couple of years for land. Is that generally accurate?
It depends on the area.
Right.
And so, if you're going to have all these sort of micro economies in land, I would say Florida land has not gone down.
Sure.
Whereas, some other areas, for example, maybe in the Midwest, it has gone down. And
Yeah.
but in our market, it's still also inefficient anyways.
Yeah.
And our ratios remain the same. So if we have to pay a little bit more, we sell it
Yeah.
for a little more. And so when the prices go down, well, it all kind of goes down at the same time.
And so you don't have to share what market, but do you personally buy in one or two specific markets and that's kind of like your area, or do you like buy kind of all over the country, just wherever it makes sense, or do you feel like once you know that market, what this, is it better to kind of have a very kind of rifle approach versus more of a shotgun approach, knowing one specific area and kind of what things are worth and buying and selling stuff there?
Yeah, it's a great question because I think it depends on where you are and the maturity of where your land business is. So if you were my client and you said, "Mark, how do I start?" I would say, well, Bronson, number one, what's your budget? How much money, how much capital are you coming in with? And so that's number one. And number two, what's your experience with this? Where are your systems and processes? So when you're first starting, I would say have a beachhead.
Yeah,
Just be an expert in one county and
sure.
then expand from there.
Yeah,
So I've been doing this for so long. I'm in multiple states, I'm in multiple counties, but they're all sort of geographically similar in the sense that I want to be in the Southwest, Northwest California and Florida, and a little bit in the Midwest. So areas with a plethora of inexpensive raw land, but I'm avoiding the Northeast. I'm avoiding any environmental areas as well.
Yeah, yeah, that's interesting. What would you say? I mean, I know environmental areas might be a challenge. What are some of the bigger challenges for people when they get started in this or they get going?
I think the biggest challenge is fear. So what will happen is they'll buy a few pieces of land and then they'll stop their deal flow. They'll stop mailing, they'll stop making offers. And so you've got this 6 week window of time between the time you send out offers, the time they start coming back, and
Yeah,
they start accepting your offer. And so you think to yourself, well, okay, I'm not going to buy any more land until I sell my current inventory.
yeah,
And then what happens is you become Chick-fil-A without chicken, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
so you don't want to stop your deal flow. That's a
You
common
just got to keep
mistake.
it going, keep the
You got to keep it
advertising and all
going.
that
Yeah,
going.
because
So
yeah,
that, yeah.
because you had mentioned it even earlier. Like we're making our money on the buy.
Yeah. Yeah, that's it. No, it's huge. Well, it's amazing. I just did a video about this recently on YouTube about how inefficient markets are amazing. So, an efficient market would be like the stock market or some publicly traded, company or something that's, everybody kind of knows this is what this commodity is worth on this day at this time. But things like raw land in a rural area, like no one knows what it's worth. It's totally inefficient. But the benefit is you can come in and for someone that it's hard to tell what it's worth and they don't really want it anyway because they're obviously not paying taxes on it and you have your strategy to go after it. It's a great way to really create value. And so I've seen, you're kind of doing what a lot of great real estate folks, whether you're a real estate, you're like a operator, it could be you're a wholesaler, you're coming in adding value and renovating a property, you're doing all different types of things. You're creating value from, hey, this land is somebody doesn't value this, and there's a way we can find a better value for it, and then that neighbor is going to be really happy with it, or that somebody coming in and using it and building it or whatever, they're going to say, oh, this is amazing. So you find that just putting it, especially when you market it on Craigslist or on some of the other sites where it's more Facebook or Meta, you're seeing a lot of people are interested in this. When you put raw land there, people will buy off of those sites.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah,
Uh, and we even have good metrics. So it depends on, what your platform is, but let's say you're getting 1 to 3 leads on, say, a land.com, you should be closing that property. Where on a Facebook, you might have to have a virtual assistant that's filtering those leads. It's going to take, let's say, 50 leads on average
right.
before you get a sale. So okay, here's my metric. Well, if I'm not getting 50 leads, I got a marketing problem. But
Yeah,
if I'm getting 50 leads and no one's putting their down payment down, I've got a sales problem. And
right.
so it's really important to know these metrics going in, your KPIs going in.
Yeah, that's huge. Well, no, I love it. And it sounds like, your background, do you feel like it helped you with investment banking to have some of those metrics and kind of build systems or do you think it just kind of took time for you to learn how to do all this? And I mean, because you've developed quite a machine here and maybe able to help other people create their own machine. Do you think that's just from experience where you kind of like, where like you said, your mentor came and said, hey, you're not really doing this right, whatever. And you're like, what do you mean? I'm great, and then
Yeah,
yeah.
I wish I could say just had this great background. No, I've made, so many mistakes. And I continue to make mistakes. I'm in strategic coach as well. I'm in other
Okay.
mastermind groups as well. And I think, having that sort of perspective, because when you're in it, it's hard to step away from that sort of your myopic view, and you could be trapped by expertise as well. And so you'd mentioned that blue ocean strategy. Well, I think there's these blue ocean lenses where someone from another industry or another entrepreneur can look at what we're doing in real estate and see it from their lens and like, oh, wait,
Yeah.
why don't you do it this way? I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
that's kind of brilliant.
Yeah.
And so what's obvious to someone else that's not obvious to you can really make a huge difference.
You
So
know,
but to your point, yeah, I'm just constantly learning.
yeah. And that's why I love that you're part of strategic coach and other masterminds as well. Cause I think that's how we grow or we get around other people. I read a lot of books. Last year I was able to finish 98 books. Thankfully, that's most I've ever read, but like, or listened to. And it's just amazing because like, you'll like be listening to a biography from some, 100-year-old historical character. And it's like, oh, that applies to this, or that applies to here. And you just start pulling from all these different things. And then you realize like everything's related to everything else. And I'm sure for you, like, it's so funny, investment banking and mergers and acquisitions where you're buying businesses. Like kind of what you, I mean, it's different, but you're still going in and you're finding value, you're identifying. And so you're doing it in a different way, but you found kind of using some of that ability to identify value. Warren Buffett talks about, he's like, it's like investing, good investing is like buying dollar bills for 40 cents. Right. And a lot of
Right.
people think, well, if it's really a dollar bill, it wouldn't be there. That's not even fair. That's not even real. But like, you're obviously doing it. You're getting even cheaper than that. Right. And so why do you,
Absolutely.
let me ask you this, why do you think a lot of people have a hard time grasping that concept of price is what you pay and value is what you get?
I, it's interesting because I'm a huge Morgan Housel fan. He has a new
Yeah.
book that just came out, the same as ever. And
Yeah.
I'm
I've heard
like
that
you.
too. That's a good one. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm constantly reading and listening to his books and getting that information as well. I think I th- you know I think people are just very comfortable with what they know.
Yeah.
Speaking of a book, I'm reading Determined by Robert Sapolsky,
What's it called again?
and
Determined?
Determined, and it's a very sciencey book, but it really sort of highlights just the luck involved in life, and in the fact that we don't pick our parents, we don't pick where we're born, and everything sort of stems from this prior experience. And just for example, the luck of listening to this podcast, right, and having you as a mentor, which costs no money, but anyone now can go and listen to your podcast. But there's thousands of podcasts out
Yeah.
there, and so why would I be interested in this podcast over, say, one that's a serial killer podcast, right? One's
Right.
going to make me a lot of money, and one's going to open my horizons to passive income and all these types of things, where the other podcast is just going to make me anxious
Yeah.
and feel like the world's an unsafe place. But
Right. True.
but some prior experience leads you to that. And so this idea of sort of the luck and the unluckiness of all these things that we don't get to choose, um, is just really
Huh.
fascinating to me.
That is, Tony Robbins, I follow him a bit, and he says, where focus goes, energy flows. And so it's kind of like whatever you focus on is what you become. I was talking to somebody the other day, and I was like, when in high school, I used to watch horror movies, and then I get nightmares, and then I stopped watching horror movies, and the nightmares went away. So I was like, maybe I shouldn't watch horror movies, and it's a very common sense thing, but a lot of times, like, I will think, oh, this watching this thing or going somewhere or being around certain people, it doesn't affect me in the way that, it's not a big deal. But as Jim Rohn would say, you're the average of the five people you spend the most time with. And so that's almost in every area of life. You look at their finances, their spirituality, their health, their attitude, all, and it's net worth. All those things are kind of like are together. So, well, I love this is shift a little bit to personal development. Let's talk a little bit personal development. What are some other things that you do, or maybe some goals you have in the area of personal development that you're working on?
Yeah, I mean, I take it very, very seriously. In fact, to a point where like people sort of make fun of me and my routine. So I have a
Me too.
Streaks app, and so it's been like I think 380 days now, where every morning I journal, I read, I do breath work, and I
Yeah.
meditate. And
Okay.
so I forgot who said this, but to me, my goal is I want all the things that money can't buy, right?
Yeah.
And that's going to be a calm mind, a fit body, and a house full of love. And
Yeah.
so if I can work on that every single day and the James Clear sort of compounding of it,
Yeah.
then 10 years from now, my life is going to be exponentially better than it was 10 years ago, just working on those three main goals. And that's really what I try to do. And the business supports the freedom to go and do those things, because look, at the end of life, I really think that we're going to ask ourselves two questions. Did I love, and was I loved? And
Yeah.
everything else, right? We're going to lose everyone and everything, and that's going to be it. And and I just don't want to have those regrets, and I want to have the time and the freedom and the energy to do those things.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I love what you shared. I mean, life is short, and it's really the things that, I know the older I get, and I'm not that old, 43, but the older I get, the more I was like, every year just goes by. I find myself, catching myself, oh, 20 years ago, this happened or whatever. And I'm like, man, I'm getting old, but time goes quickly. So it is, I think it's about investing in the things that matter. And it's that idea of sowing and reaping, like whatever we're putting in the ground now, And of course, with your land flipping, whatever you're so, you're finding the land that, but you will reap. And I think how you speak and the people you surround yourself with and the books that you read, all those things you're investing in yourself. And people wonder, like, sometimes in my life, I'm sure in your life as well, like, how do you have this degree of success? How have you done this? How are you doing all these things that you're doing? And I traveled 6 times internationally. I'm going to Everest Base Camp this year, and then Portugal, and like I have all these, and I just love that stuff, right? But it's
Right.
because chosen to invest in myself, and you have as well. And as you do that, it's you really become a different person. So it's not like you're just like a better version of yourself. It's like you're continually evolving and shifting and becoming this new person that is like your best self, your ideal. Ben Hardy would say, like, your future self now, right? You're seeing yourself in that light, and then you're taking those actions to be able to get there. So that's awesome, man. Let me ask you on the back to the land flipping. Is there any other assets that you're seeing this? And I'm curious because you've done a lot of iBanking and other things. I know people buy businesses and other things. Are there other things personally that you do besides the land flipping that kind of has that same kind of value there, where you're able to find something really undervalued that nobody really wants and be able to take it and turn it around and sell it, or use it in some other way?
Yeah, it's so funny because when I first started my career and I started my own podcast and I'd have people like you on, I would have sort of this shiny object syndrome,
Right.
and I'd want to start, going into it, and then when I'm going into it, uh, I'd start asking questions to other people, and they're experts. And I remember this one guy looked at me, and I think I forgot what the niche might have been. Was it mobile home investing, or I don't know. And I was gonna start looking into it. And he's like,
Right.
Mark, he's like, if you start seeing deals, there's a reason you're seeing the deals. He's like, I've been doing this for 20 years. Like, why would you see the deal when I wouldn't, kind of thing? And he's like, where's your advantage? And so I always thought, okay, why don't I just keep compounding on where I have an advantage? And
Hmm.
so I've been doing land investing so long, I joke like I'm an inch wide and a mile deep because I don't have an advantage anywhere else. So to me, it only makes sense for me to operate where I have this advantage. And
Yeah.
so if I was building a bridge, when I wanted to build a half a bridge and then stop and go start building another bridge and start from the very beginning, no, I want to complete the bridge. And so for me, I'd rather just find experts in their particular niche. If I want to invest in multifamily, I think multifamily is great. I want to find the best operator on the planet who has a distinct advantage.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's all, and just do it passively. And
That-
so when I operate, I want to be the best at what I do and ignore everything else. And if I need to get depreciation, like all my multifamily friends
yeah. Yeah.
and all those fun things, then I just go to them and invest passively.
That's huge. Well, I think there's a lot of takeaways there of staying in your lane and just figuring out what you do well. And even, as a passive investor, what you're familiar with, you're comfortable with, you have some sort of edge in. I've heard a lot of people say that as well, of like, what is your investing edge? If you have a background, like for me, mine was in the medical field. So there's some edge there of getting into certain medical companies or operations of medical or hospital type things. Like I know a lot about that, right? Or I've worked with a lot of physicians. And so you have an edge in what you're doing, which I think is great. And so I think anybody listening can think about their background, and it's not like you just leave everything behind, but you actually can pull those business skills or life skills or other interests or passions that you have into your investing as well. Well, that's awesome. Well, Mark, I just wanted to say I really appreciate you coming on the show today. It's been really fascinating, both on the personal development side. I think you're just a stellar guy, and just obviously it's super impressive what you've built, the engines that you built for yourself as well as for other people, and that you are doing that. Um, and also the way you're really you're continuing to look forward and what you want to create for your life and the people around you and the home. I love what you're talking about, the development stuff you're doing as well, which is amazing. So how can people follow you, get in touch with you, and follow what you're doing?
Yeah, I think the best place to go is just thelandgeek.com, thelandgeek.com. And for your listeners, I'll have a special link for them to go and get Dirt Rich free. You just pay the shipping. But they'll have a link to do that. But I think that's really the best place to start.
Awesome, man. Well, I really appreciate it. I love your strategy. I think it's a very unique strategy. And I know people are doing this, but I think you've created a way to do it that you're teaching others and scaling folks. So thanks for being here. I'm looking forward to being on your show coming up here soon. So that'll be a lot of fun. And thanks again for being with us here today.
Thanks, Branson.
Okay, so I hope you enjoyed that interview. One of my biggest takeaways from that was how into personal development Mark is. Multiple mastermind groups. We talk about this a little bit after the interview as well, and just super interested to learn and read. And I'm of the belief that it's what you're speaking right now, the books you're reading right now, the actions you're taking right now are really what are going to lead you to where you're going to be in 3 to 5 years. So it takes a little time to get where you want to go, but that's just how people make big moves. As they start to invest in themselves, they start moving towards their goals, and it begins to happen. So I'm a big goals guy, big morning routine, all that stuff. So I hope for you got something out of this that was encouraging to you. Again, it's always interesting to learn about new assets or things if you're not doing them. It is also important to avoid shiny object syndrome. So again, a fully passive option. If you're interested in joining our investment club, we have the Bronson Equity Investor Club at bronsonequity.com/join. You can join. You'll hear about our upcoming deals, which we have some super exciting stuff coming up that I can't really speak about yet, but just stuff that I think is some of the most unique investments that I've seen in a long time, and that I'm really excited about where we're headed with these, and there's the opportunity to partner with us. So that's kind of how it works. You join the club, then you start hearing about some of these amazing deals. So check that out. We'll get on a call with you, just a brief call, and find out a little bit about your investment goals, and then go from there. So I hope you enjoyed this show. Let me know if you do reach out and you're interested in connecting with Mark on this. Would love to hear that. And thanks for taking the time to educate yourself. We'll look forward to seeing you on the next episode of the Mailbox Money Show. You've been listening to the Mailbox Money Podcast. For more free resources, articles, and videos, go to bronsonequity.com. There you can download your copy of the special report, The Single Best Investment Strategy During and After a Pandemic. None of the information shared here is an offer to buy a specific investment, and this is for educational purposes only. Consult your financial, legal, and tax professionals and use your own common sense before making any investment decisions. Thanks for joining us, and be sure to tune in next time for more Mailbox Money.